From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. First day of spring, and happy birthday to Cindy, lives in Glendora, California. From your daughter, Heather. Later tonight, wizards and strange creatures. But here's what's happening. A large earthquake has struck near Acapulco on Mexico's Pacific coast. The USGS said the quake had a magnitude of 7.4. Witnesses in the capital city of Mexico City said the tremor sent office workers rushing out onto the streets. Some 500 houses were damaged. No reports of injuries. We've got some friends who are down there. You know, Marla Martinson, the Beverly Hills housewife and matchmaker, she was down there with her husband, Adolfo. They've just returned back. And they were right in the middle of all of that mess, so I'm glad you're back, both of you. For the second night in a row, residents in Clintonville, Wisconsin, say they felt booms. Clintonville police say just before 3 a.m. Tuesday, the area of the unexplained booms are getting bigger. They're intensifying. Reports are that the booming is spreading to areas south and west of the original area of explosions that were felt on Sunday. But what the heck is going on? Let's check in with reporter Terry Lee, WTAQ, AM and FM, our affiliate in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Terry, what do they have an explanation yet for this?
Not a single one at this point. They are trying to investigate every single possibility and basically going down a list, eliminating the possibilities of what it could be. They've checked with electrical, sewer, water, dams in the area, the river. They can't find out or explain what is causing this booming, rattling, and thunder-like noise that is shaking and waking people up mostly during the overnight hours the past 2 nights.
Terry, what are they telling people? Are they afraid? Are they telling them to get out of their houses? What's going on?
You know, at this point, they say that they don't think that the public is in any sort of danger at all. But, there are residents that are expressing concerns now after a second night here, and we're still experiencing now to see if it is going to happen into a third night here. And a public meeting has been called for tomorrow night to try to provide some answers, but not give an exact idea of the source of what's happening here, just to provide and bring some ease and tension down a little bit among the residents.
What's so strange? It's happening all around the planet right now.
I have heard that. I've been reading reports that this has really been a strange phenomenon that has been happening and seems to be growing in popularity in reports.
All right. Thank you, Terry. That's reporter Terry Lee, WTAQ, AM and FM in Green Bay, Wisconsin, our affiliate out there. Some fear that a mysterious executive order from President Barack Obama regarding disaster preparedness is a troubling hint at the possibility of martial law. Some groups are concerned that the order, which President Obama signed on Friday, gives the president absolute control over the country's natural resources in case of a natural disaster or during a time of war, fueling speculation that the Obama administration is making preparations for war with Iraq and Iran. In a moment, Alex Jones joins us. He'll tell us about that story. The Tax Policy Center looked into the revenue loss associated with House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan's plan to cut the tax code down 2 rates of 10% and 25%. And they estimate the changes would raise $31.1 trillion over 10 years, but they say that's $10 million less than the tax code would raise if the Bush tax cuts were allowed to expire, $4.6 trillion less if the Bush tax cuts were extended. Ms. Shedlock, registered investment advisor with us. Ms., tax cuts are good. Is this going to happen?
I don't think this is going to happen. Look at the deal here. Actually, I'm pretty aggravated over this. If we go back to last fall and just take the proposal that almost passed, we would be better off than any of these deals. Ryan has come out today and he's proposed cutting $5.3 trillion over 10 years. That's $530 billion, right, over a year. But the deficit is what? It's $1.4 trillion. So we're still talking about leaving us with, $900 billion or $1 trillion deficit. That's assuming the United States doesn't fall back in recession, and sometime over the next few years, anyway, I think that's pretty likely here. So the other agonizing thing about this, George, as I look at this, is the way that he went about this. This was purposely designed to be a political stunt. He said that he would do this. He wanted to slash taxes, but he also wants to raise defense spending. He wants to go back, renege on the wimpy deal. It was a pretty wimpy deal that actually passed last fall, cutting a mere $55 billion a year out of the defense budget. He wants to put all of that back and cut it out of entitlements. George, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent. So I look at these things and I'm saying, okay, this deal he's proposing is so one-sided that the only possible point that he can have to propose this thing is political expediency. Meanwhile, Mitt Romney has come out today and wants to add $8.3 trillion, $800 billion a year in defense spending. George, you know we can't afford that.
We can't afford much of this anymore. Mitt Romney, of course, winning Illinois tonight in that primary out there. Look, I'm in favor of keeping taxes where they are right now as long as they cut the budget. Thank you so much, Mish. Hairdressers can and should be trained to check their clients for skin cancer, according to health experts in the United Kingdom. They say out there 100,000 new cases of skin cancer are diagnosed in the UK every year. Many go undetected for years, meaning delayed treatment, poor outlook, possibly even fatalities. Hairdressers might be able to help out a little bit there. The new iPad may be a hot item in more than one way. In the 5 days since the popular tablet went on sale, Apple comment boards have filled with reports from owners who say the back of the device grows so warm to the touch that it's uncomfortable, especially in the bottom left-hand corner when held in the portrait mode, for whatever that means. So monitor that. A new clue in one of the 20th century's most enduring mysteries could soon uncover the fate of the American aviator Amelia Earhart, who went missing without a trace over the South Pacific 75 years ago. Enhanced analysis of a photograph taken just months after Earhart's Lockheed Electra plane vanished shows what experts think may be the landing gear of the aircraft protruding from the waters off a remote island in what is now called the Pacific nation of Kiribati. If you go in the news at coasttocoastam.com, Australia's heaviest man is turning to hypnosis in the hopes that it will help him lose weight. He weighs 661 pounds. He wants to drop 400 pounds. They're going to do it by hypnosis. They're going to associate his favorite foods with foul images, hoping that when he's ready to take a bite out of this stuff, he won't eat it. Up next, Alex Jones joins us. Are we headed for martial law? Alex is next. Special 2 hours on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Alex Jones with us. I call him the Paul Revere of the modern era. He's an award-winning broadcaster, and here he is on Coast to Coast, and we're going to talk about the possibility of martial law. Alex, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
George, I'm great, and thank you so much for having me on because this subject is all important.
I hear you've been very busy these days.
Well, unfortunately, I've been covering the fact that the global elite, the major financial interests that have hijacked this nation and many others, want to overthrow our Bill of Rights and Constitution and establish a dictatorial system. But things have been moving very, very quickly, and now even conservative groups, liberal groups, the ACLU, Ron Paul, across the political spectrum, constitutional scholars are looking at what's happening and saying, yes, it's true, our republic is being basically abolished right now.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what's going on. What are these executive orders? And Alex, for people who don't understand how legislation works and how executive orders work, tell us the procedure and what do they mean?
Sure. Under our system, you have legislative, that's the Congress. You have judicial, that's the courts. You have executive, that's the president. And at the state level, the governors. And back in George Washington's day, 235 years ago, they would have executive orders within the congressional budget that the president was given for the type of linen and cutlery and plates that Mrs. Washington would have when they had state dinners, and what Congress would allot the president for food he could buy for state dinners. And so an executive order was simply a note where the president was then designating the congressional funding he got, where that would go. Now, since the National Security Act in 1947, presidents were given more and more leeway to actually be able to direct the military and intelligence agencies, but only under the overall mission given to the president by Congress. The Congress passes the laws, controls the money, the purse strings, but the president then, within narrow confines, executes operations. Since then, we've seen presidents really in the last 30 years or so come out and say, hey, we'll do whatever we want under executive orders. In fact, we'll even bypass Congress, and more, Congress is basically allowed to take place. There was a Clinton official who famously said what Paul Begala said, stroke of the pen, law of the land, kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so because they haven't been challenged now, we saw a spectacle just 2 weeks ago, and this, of course, got major coverage, where the Secretary of Defense went before Congress and the Senate, and they said, look, you've got to get our authorization to go into Syria. You went into Libya without congressional authorization. That's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. This is illegal. And the Secretary of Defense, Panetta, looked right at him and said 5 times in a row, we don't come to you for war now. The president gets his orders from the United Nations and NATO. So it's not just a president saying, I take orders from myself, I'm a dictator. No, the bureaucracy that controls the president, he's just a puppet to a great extent. They're telling Congress, the power of the purse, the people's representatives, the legitimate government, the legislature of this republic, that, hey, we don't need you anymore. In fact, you don't have a purview. This is a declaration of tyranny, a declaration of treachery, a declaration of treason. Literally, we take our orders from the United Nations. And it was just unprecedented. So since then, last Friday, right before St. Paddy's Day, when nobody was paying attention, the National Defense Resources Preparedness Act was put into place via an executive order, and it pointed back.
And nobody challenges these things, do they, Alex?
No, Congress has 45 days to challenge an executive order, and 99% of the time they don't.
They don't do anything.
They don't challenge it because they're basically bought and paid for, and the big financial interests want this. They want the presidency to be a rubber stamp. They want Congress to become vestigial, ceremonial. And it's the same all over the world. Parliaments are being made ceremonial. In Europe, they admit that private mega banks are appointing the presidents or prime ministers now. And the Economist magazine, the Financial Times of London say, isn't it great? We've got technocrats now that tell us what to do. So they're selling incredible financial occupation as if it's a really cute thing. So this new executive order, the National Defense Resources Preparedness, they signed it Friday night right before St. Patrick's Day. And then on Saturday and Sunday, when civil libertarian groups, lawyers, and others looked at it and said, man, this is really scary. This hands the entire economy over to the executive. It allows the public to be put into work brigades. It allows public lands to be sold off. This is really dangerous.
And what's the definition, Alex, to kick this into effect?
That's the point. Exactly, yeah. George. In 1950, the Congress gave this power under narrowly defined preparations for World War III with the Russians or a nuclear attack, that then the president could come in and reorganize society when U.S. cities had been hit by a bunch of nuclear weapons. Instead, President Obama came out and changed just a few lines of language to say this continuity of government emergency procedure can now be used in peacetime for any emergency, including economic, and it activates, that are tied into this order, hundreds of executive orders that deal with work brigades, taking over farms, ranches, water, infrastructure, communications. It really is martial law. And so what's scary is the system, George, is beginning to thaw out Cold War provisions that were never used, and the system is trying to implement it. And what's really frightening is we have this whole backdrop of the National Defense Authorization Act, as you know, signed on New Year's Eve when they thought nobody would pay attention. Again, that same story.